Do you believe in ghosts? Check out this possible spirit caught on camera rising from the ground of a Civil War cemetery. Or maybe this video of a phone being yanked off the hook by an unseen force. What do you think is going on here in these videos? You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. People send me their reports of ghost sightings every single day. These entities are seen and felt all over the world almost constantly, yet people are ridiculed for believing in them. Today we are going to look into 5 allegedly real ghost sightings. Keep an open mind, and let's see what you believe by the end. If you want your story in a future video, I'm still looking for some scary experiences using Lyft. You can send it to me at darknessprevails.org/submit. Also, stay till the end for my reaction to my favorite early comments from the previous video. Now then, who you gonna call? Me. You're gonna call me, because I want to see this. Number 1. Don't leave your windows open when you're sleeping. Submitted by Chi. For the past couple of weeks or so, the days have been getting warmer up here. I'm from Wisconsin, so all the posts you see on the internet about the snowstorms have already passed us. A couple of days ago, I opened my window and let in some fresh air. The day quickly passed by as I scrambled to finish my homework for the next day. When I was done, I got in bed and listened to some YouTube videos, trying to fall asleep. But I unknowingly left my window open. I woke up in the middle of the night and I listened for my phone. Though I'd left it on playing YouTube videos, I couldn't hear a sound coming from it, so I assumed my phone battery was at 0. As I was about to go back to bed, I looked toward my window and I saw something that shocked me. My eyes went wide, and my heart seemed to stand still in the moment. There was someone crawling into my room, and only after a second of seeing it, I realized it wasn't a typical person. Their torso was long, almost stretched out, but its arms were longer with bony fingers and sharpened nails. The skin was gray, and its hair was scraggly. It was crawling down from my window, which itself was 20 feet off the ground from outside. Though I had just sat up to look at my phone, I was now too terrified to move at all, or even scream. So I closed my eyes and was ready for my fate. It was silent for a long while. Maybe I was actually seeing things, I thought. But the silence of the night was soon broken when I heard the sound of scratching on my pillow. Memories of the thing I'd just seen crawling inside rushed back into my mind like water through a broken reservoir. I could not only hear it, but feel it as it ran its long nails down my pillow. I closed my eyes tightly again, but all I could think about was what its smile might look like. Perhaps it was content in knowing how scared it had me. I was helpless, and I soon gave up, knowing that this could be it. The pure terror, the feeling of an empty, cold pit in the center of your stomach. And then, everything stopped. The sounds of nails, the feeling of a presence next to me, and even my fear left me. It happened all at once. Given the opportunity, I literally jumped up and ran to turn on my bedroom lights. I was alone in my room again, and the window was still open. Somehow I managed to finish the rest of my sleep that night, probably because I went to the living room instead of staying in my bedroom. I don't know what it was I saw, but something tells me it wasn't completely physical. As if something from my dreams or nightmares actually does live in another plane or dimension. Maybe it was lured inside by me being half asleep, half conscious, and the sound of my phone playing. Regardless of what it was or wasn't, after that night, I've never left my window open or even uncovered. The last thing I want is something else crawling through my window when I'm sleeping. Number 2. Spectre in the Field, submitted by Liam F. It was over a decade ago when I was 7 or 8 years old. I'm from southwest Scotland, and I live in a medium-sized suburban town surrounded by lowland, countryside, and farms. I used to be friends with a guy who lived in one of the various houses dotting around the back roads and farms outside of my town. Let's call him Eddie. I would always go to visit Eddie in his semi-isolated home. We loved to play army men in the field beside his house. During one of these times playing in the field, we both saw something that neither of us had ever seen before or since. Something that horrified us and amazed us at the same time. It was around 7 p.m. in late November when it happened. Eddie's parents didn't mind us playing in the dark, as we had done so countless times before, and nothing bad had ever happened. But there's a first time for everything. Anyway, Eddie and I were venturing off to a cluster of large boulders in a far corner of the field. It was our base of operations, so to speak. We were just discussing our plan of attack for our little army men. We were about 50 or so meters from the boulders when Eddie said, "What is that? That light? Look, man, do you see it?" I was examining one of my toys at the time, then looked up and forward as Eddie got my attention. That's when I saw the light as well. It was a pale blue glow, hazy, and it illuminated the boulders from the center. I looked at Eddie and he looked at me. We both silently agreed to pick up our pace to quickly investigate the bizarre light. As we drew closer, I realized that the light was not from an electrical source, nor from a natural source either. Things weren't making any sense. But then a figure came into shape. It was from this figure that the light seemed to be emanating from. Eddie told me to be quiet, as a worried expression spread across his face. Perhaps he thought it was an intruder. We edged closer and closer to the boulders as details began appearing on the figure. Both Eddie and I could make out that it was a tall and very broad man, whose upper body was draped in animal furs and hides. The lower half was covered by a boulder. Now, it must have been over 9 feet tall, as these boulders easily dwarfed Eddie's father, who was 6'5". I began hyperventilating as I slowly began processing what we were gazing at, because I was beginning to understand that what we were witnessing was not human at all. It was facing away from us, and it must have heard me, because a clicking sound started, like someone forcibly clacking their teeth in a very violent manner. The apparition slowly turned to face us as it loomed over the boulder, and we stopped right in our tracks. The man wore an oversized ram's skull atop of his vascular body, and the body was the teeth of the ram's skull hitting something else. The skull's teeth were chattering so fast and hard, I thought the bones would shatter. Despite its solid appearance, Eddie whispered in a panicked and frantic tone that the boulder behind it, I can see through it. I looked at him, then looked back at the spirit. It must have been some sort of spirit. I grabbed Eddie's arm then, turned, and we bolted away. It wasn't safe there, and we needed to get home. We sprinted back as fast as our young legs could carry us. We didn't look back, as we had sated our curiosity plenty. As we eventually made it back to the safety of Eddie's home, I could see that his skin was solid pale, pale as the moon, and his eyes were just so wide. He looked at me as if I was the same, pale and wide-eyed, and we didn't talk about it at all. I think we were in denial. We didn't even try to ease our minds by playing his PS2, we just sat silently. The next morning, I left his house when my mother came to pick me up. I hadn't spoken to him since the end of our first year of high school. That experience changed us. I think about the encounter from time to time, and I try to tell myself that it must have been our adolescent minds projecting our imaginations, but that doesn't even sound like an actual thing. What we saw was no imaginary friend. It was vivid. I was lucid, and that thing looked back at us. Number 3. The Girl in the White Dress. Submitted by Valentine. This happened 3 years ago when I was 12 years old. It all started at school. I was going to the bathroom during my math lesson. The hallways were empty and eerily quiet. I'd been going to this school almost my entire life by then, and I had never once experienced or seen anything paranormal, let alone terrifying. So I'm in the bathroom, doing my business, when I see someone walking into one of the stalls. I thought nothing of it at first, but then I realized that they weren't making any sounds. That was really weird, but maybe it was just someone pretending to go to the bathroom so that they could skip out on a lesson or two. I stopped thinking about it beyond that, and I exited my stall. As I stood at the sink washing my hands, I heard a stall door open behind me, but I didn't see or hear anyone walking out of it. It was starting to creep me out, so I just went back to my classroom in a hurry. The whole time I was walking back to my class through the hallway, I had this feeling like I was being followed by someone or something, and I felt that I wasn't alone in there. I started to run, and at one point I remember hearing footsteps behind me in between my own. But when I looked, there was no one else there. The rest of the day at school, nothing else happened. But I did tell my friend about it. When I told her, she looked so pale, so I inquired about her knowing anything. She told me that yesterday some other students, older students, played with a Ouija board there in the bathroom. They did it as a joke, but they left the bathroom with these scared looks on their faces. That was enough to creep me out, so I told myself I'd never use that bathroom again. If I had to, I'd just wait until I got home. That day, as I was heading home from school, I once more felt like I was being watched or followed every second of the way. I tried to brush it off as my brain scaring me, because I had been pretty freaked out earlier, and what my friend told me was fresh on my mind. But the rest of the evening, nothing happened, not until midnight. When it was midnight, I was walking to the kitchen downstairs, and the feeling returned. My dad was in the shower close to the kitchen, so I felt a bit better, not so alone. I walked into the dark kitchen and turned the lights on. I don't remember closing the door, but maybe I did. The door has glass on it, so you can see through it. I was heading towards the door to go back upstairs when I saw what looked like a woman running past my door to the dark living room across the way. I saw her in detail. She was wearing all white, and her hair was about shoulder length and solid black. I was confused. For a moment, I stood there in front of the door, just looking through the glass. Then the lights around the house started to flicker, and that's when I knew that I needed to get out of there. I ran out of the kitchen, up the stairs to the bathroom where my dad was. Then I turned and looked down the stairs into the dark room, which apparently was the room the ghost or spirit had ran into. I couldn't see anything because it was too dark, but deep down, I could feel something looking back at me. I went back up to my room, and I was still shaken up. Over time, I calmed down, and I was eventually trying to fall asleep. But I thought I could hear breathing in my room, and at one point in the night, I heard what sounded like a woman crying. I didn't sleep at all that night because her crying kept me awake. In the morning, I told my grandma my story. She jokingly said it was just her. I knew she wasn't going to take it seriously, because I was just 12 and for some reason that made me stupid. But I'll tell you one thing, I slept in my room with the doors locked. Otherwise, why would my grandma, in the middle of the night, stand in my room in the dark where I couldn't see her and cry all night long? That was the end of the story, thank God. I was never a fan of the paranormal, and I never will be. Nothing else happened to me later, but even now I'm still confused as to what it was. But whoever or whatever the spirit is, I never want to see you or hear you again. Number 4. Real Cursed Story. Submitted by Joey2K35. I believe I've had many experiences with the paranormal in my life. I've seen everything from doors opening by themselves, and I've heard disembodied voices threatening my life. But this is nothing like I've ever experienced before. Me and my friend's sisters both play softball during the spring and summer, so that means me and my friends got to play and hang out during their games. Our favorite thing to do during this time was to try to scare each other as much as possible, telling scary stories to each other. And honestly, we gave one another a pretty good scare with some of our made-up stories. But this time, we got more than a simple scare. It was late in the spring of 2011 when, during a softball game, my friend and I found ourselves telling spooky stories as usual. Now let me tell you that it was a very humid day with clear skies and a nice gentle breeze, and no weather forecast at all for any rain or thunderstorms. If I remember correctly, we were talking about spirits, and I got the bright idea to completely make up a ghost story called The Dark Demon. The story told about a demon stalking and taking the lives and souls of innocent people in gruesome ways. It's terrible, I know, but I knew it would give us the creeps, and that was the end goal. As I finished my made-up story, out of nowhere, lightning began to boom and rain began to pour down. We looked out from where we were and saw that the nice clear day had perished. Now there were dark clouds rolling in and a storm was brewing. I wasn't happy about that, because that meant I wouldn't be able to see my friend more until the next game, which took place the following week. The softball game was called short, and so was our fun. Now, here's where things get really creepy. Around 3 days after I told my story, my sister's friend OD'd on his medication while his family was away. They came home to him being long gone. It was tragic and terrible, something no one saw coming. And at first I thought this was just a simple, unfortunate event, until the next game came around. As me and my friend absolutely loved our made-up story, Us being kids, we wanted to make it into a book, and that was definitely a mistake. Not even a day later, I made the Dark Demon into a little makeshift book from printing paper, and I even drew a picture of how I thought the Dark Demon would look. He was all black, with deep, penetrating red glowing eyes and skeletal hands. I was proud of my work and showed my parents the book, but as they read it, I noticed that both of them seemed uneasy seeing and reading it. I don't know if it was the graphic detail of what I described in the book, of people passing or stuff like that, or if they knew something that I didn't. Since then, I began to grow suspicious of my own story, and I noticed that things were happening each time the story was spoken. First, the storm came from nowhere, then the passing of my sister's friend. At this point, I was determined to see what would happen if I spoke the story again, and I regret that with my life. I told my friend about the events that have occurred ever since we first told the story. I explained to him that I needed to see what would happen if I told the story again. He agreed, and we would keep an eye out for anything bad or weird. Now, this is the part where I feel I am responsible for this, and I haven't told my parents this, but the next day, as I was watching TV with my dad, I was horrified at what she said. She's crying and explaining that my grandma somehow broke her arm while scooping ice cream and was being treated at the hospital for it. I wish that was all that happened, but unfortunately it wasn't. Because at the hospital, they found cancer that had gone unnoticed for too long, and there was a chance she wouldn't make it. A week later, my grandma passed away in her sleep. I feel like all of this is my fault, and that the Dark Demon is a cursed story, or it's a very weird coincidental case of bad luck. My friend and I agreed to never speak of the story again, in hopes of this string of unfortunate events will be over. We're making sure that nobody can read that story. I even burned the book I made when I got home, and I haven't shared the actual story with anyone since. I know many of you won't believe this story. It's just ironic that a story I made up that seems so innocent and fictional became a true tale of terror, possibly ending two separate lives. And in the story itself, the original story I told, the demon took 2 lives. I'll probably take the story to my grave in hopes that I don't feel responsible for anything else. If you had to ask me, I think that it's not the story that's special. Rather, I believe there are always evil entities around, looking for any excuse or portal to enter our world and cause destruction and chaos. And number 5, The Ghost at Lake Mead. Submitted by Sunny. This is a true story of my own that I don't really enjoy talking about, or even thinking about for that matter. But it's been a while. It's been long enough to finally get it off my chest in some way. It's been close to 10 years now since my wife's birthday in August of 2008. This is how the story goes. My wife and I decided to go night fishing at Lake Mead, since it could be very hot in the daytime, especially in August at Lake Mead, so we packed up all our fishing gear. Then we headed out to the lake for a fun-filled fishing night. Little did we know the horror that we were about to encounter that evening. We were about to see something straight from a nightmare. I remember it so clearly as we pulled up to launch the boat. Around that time, it was 7 p.m. We were getting everything ready. Me and my wife hopped in the boat, and we trolled our way to a lucky fishing spot the place we always went to and had good luck with. I, for one, was feeling quite confident about that spot tonight. We get to the spot, and I put down the anchor, and without wasting any more time, we start to fish. Hours went by silently, and nothing was coming up, which was strange, as before we would always get bites, even if we couldn't keep what we caught. I was beginning to feel discouraged, when, a little after midnight it must have been, suddenly, there were 4 loud bangs coming from the bottom of our boat, like something big and heavy was pounding against it. I immediately assumed it was some sort of freak fish. I mean, what else could be that big in the water doing that? My wife was startled and immediately was scared, so I tried to calm her down, but I was a little freaked out too, to be honest, as I really had no idea what it was. There shouldn't have been any fish in that lake that big, or anything that could knock that rapidly. Then the knocking stopped, and we heard splashing about 10 feet away. I turned with my spotlight, and I pointed it towards the splashing. And for a moment I was relieved to see it was another person. From the shape of him, it appeared to be a man. He was wearing a yellow vest, splashing about in the water. I yelled out to them, "Are you okay?" But they didn't respond. After a few quiet seconds, I yelled again, "Hello?" But again, he didn't reply. At this point, my wife was crying and freaking out. I can't say I blame her. Just to let everyone know, we were out in the middle of the water, nowhere near land with no other boaters around. One last time, I yell out to the man, asking him, "Sir, are you okay?" And then he stopped splashing. Slowly, in a movement that seemed to last a lifetime, the figure of the man in the water turned towards us. That's when my wife began to scream. Because the man before us, he had no head. He was sitting there floating in the water, with his hands out of the water, as he began to finally sink to the bottom, and no head to be seen anywhere around. After this, I started the boat immediately, and I began to head back to the launch ramp. I'd never been so panicked and afraid in my life. As we were heading back, we heard a breathtakingly loud scream to the left of us, coming from a nearby cove that we were passing by. I tried to force myself not to turn, but my curiosity and fear got the better of me. So I turned with the spotlight again and pointed it at the noise, toward the screaming. And there he, or it, was again. Instead of being in the water, the man in yellow with no head was waving at us from the cove. By then, both me and my wife were absolutely hysterical and screaming. I dropped the throttle and got out of there as fast as possible, almost burning out my engine. When we approached the loading dock, there were other boaters there, and they noticed my wife and I freaking out. They ran to us to see if everything was okay. I explained the situation to them, and most of them were creeped out by it. My wife and I have not gone fishing out at the lake again, because there's a man with no head haunting Lake Mead. Hey, what's up? It's me, your boy, who needs a haircut. We're out here in a cemetery, as you can see, and it's all spoops. Ooh, it's a ghost. Hope I didn't forget to green screen a ghost in here. Ooh. Anyway, thank you for watching this video on 5 real ghost sightings. I hope you enjoyed. And it's time, as usual, for me to react to my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video. Are you ready? These are comments from my previous video on 10 scary KFC stories. Ooh, greasy. Mickey Williams says, someone spray painted mold across our old KFC. It sounds like they may have been trying to save you. Just look up cases from people who were infected with bread mold. Stuff'll kill ya. Kane7ify says, Popeyes is better. No, it's not. Popeyes was my first job, and all I can say is don't eat the jambalaya. Don't eat it. Just save yourself and don't eat it. The next one is 2 comments in one. From Koala Cat saying, going to KFC is a horror story in itself. Is it mashed potatoes or the souls of murdered spuds? Who knows? Well, Wanda Richardson knows because neither. They are artificial potato flakes with water. It sounds about right. From what I remembered from Popeyes, it's just these little flaky things. So enjoy your mashed air. And Only J Train says, these stories are finger-licking good. Oh, really? I want to lick your finger. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to support this channel, think about buying some merchandise at morbidmonsters.com. You can get shirts like this one, which was amazing, from the artist @limbo_the_lost on Twitter. You used to be able to buy these hats until they told me they wouldn't make them anymore, so that's great. There'll be more hats in the future. Otherwise, you can support me with $1 a month on Patreon via patreon.com/darknessprevails. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe out there and stay creepy.